Hello, you dirty potters. How are you today? Today we're going to talk about coning up and down on the wheel. Coning up and down on the wheel is essentially a continuation of the coning process, its main goal being to homogenize all of the clay, the platelets, and the structure of the clay for easier workability. This in turn not only makes a better throwing experience, but it's almost necessary for some clays, especially if you're recycling your own clay at home like I do. On top of making your clay body a little bit easier to work with, which is essentially the main goal of wedging, along with a couple of other reasons, this is a game changer. It also sets down a skill set that you're going to need at a later time for throwing off the hump, a skill that is usually used by more advanced or production potters. It's highly valued in the clay world, and this is how they make tons and tons and tons of pots off of one simple hump of clay. But in order to do this, you first need to know how to cone up and down and make that hump in the first place. Now before we start this video, I do want to say that this is a more intermediate or advanced technique. You should firstly know how to center by yourself on the wheel before learning how to cone up and down, as one precedes the other. If you don't know how to center yet, I made a video quite some time ago. It is a little bit cringe with lower quality video and sound, but I think it still holds true to the lessons I'm trying to teach you today. I will link that down below for you if you haven't seen it already. It is in the beginner's playlist. Coning up and down is fairly simple, especially if you already know how to center on the wheel first. So let's do that. As a side point, I'm not going to wedge this clay body first, just so I can make it very clear to you how powerful coning up and down is. The way you saw me just center this ball of clay is not the usual way that I personally centered. You saw me throw a ball of clay on the wheel and center it into a ball right off the bat. There was no other motion than essentially making it one smooth centered ball. I did this on purpose to illustrate the point that even though you might see a mostly centered clay body, there's still a lot of clay down below in the internal structure of this ball right here that is not technically centered. And in order to get this clay out, we need to cone up first. Put a small bit of water on the clay ball here, get both of your hands, mainly the palms of your hands, squeeze at a very even pressure, and move your hands up as you're squeezing. And the clay should move up with you. And slowly release. Potter tip! This is one very big tip that I would give to even someone who's pulling, centering. This one kind of goes across all the techniques on the wheel that you're going to learn from this point forward. Whenever you're putting pressure on a singular part of the clay body, technically speaking, the rest of the clay is still moving at the same rate that the wheel of the machine is. This means that if you stay on one place for too long, especially with not a lot of water to hydroplane, this will tear off. This is the most apparent whenever you're coning up and down. If I were to put a little bit of water here, and this is a fresh amount of water, and stay right here and cone up a little too much, I will tear off a piece of clay, ruining that portion that I was trying to cone up and down with. There's two things that you should be doing as you cone up. That is producing even pressure with both your left and your right hands. I know for you, this is my right hand, but you know, it's a little, you got it. And you should also be going at a fairly regular pace. If you take your time on one part a bit too much, you will end up taking a large chunk off, as the clay body up here is technically moving a tiny bit slower than the clay body down here, based on the amount of pressure that you're putting on it, which will force it to tear after a while. Now I gotta cone this back up. You see what I do for you? See what I do? If that does happen while you're coning up, this is a telltale sign to move your hands faster. Considering that you're putting an even amount of pressure on both sides as you cone up, if it does tear off like that, this is the clay saying you need to be moving a little bit faster. You see that? You see all that uneven clay at the very top right there? This is all of the internal clay that is uneven and non-homogenized that I was talking about after you centered that initial ball. The main point of coning up and down, being a continuation of wedging, is to get all of this clay body and smush it back down to be one nice homogeneous centered ball. So that way we have a better throwing experience, all the clay platelets are nice and aligned, as it makes for a better product and throwing experience down the line. Some people get worried about this little clay twizzle right here. Don't worry about this clay twizzle. This will go away if you center back down properly. Clay twizzle is what it's called from this point on. I'm sorry, I don't make the rules, I just enforce them. Just let your teacher know that's what it's called from now on. All school districts in California will now be updated with this terminology. From this point, it's very easy to cone back down. All you do is essentially do what you did in the first part of the video when you centered that ball, with one slight difference. Usually when you're centering with your entire hand and your palms in order to keep stability. This I would not recommend specifically for this technique. I find that it's way more effective to only touch the parts of the clay that need to be touched while spinning. So what I generally do is that I will get this part wet right here, put both of my thumbs together like this, and push downwards in a diagonal direction. If I do this smoothly and consistently enough with the right amount of pressure, it will auto center. Let me show you. Starting at the very top, I'm going to push down with my thumbs, and I'm going to keep pushing down until my pinkies reach the bottom of the wheel. And I'm going to slowly release my hands, and we've now centered the internal part of our ball of clay. Congratulations, you just coned up and down. That's essentially what coning up and down is. Now granted, this is the first and second step to the two-part process, although many potters will continuously do this until they can feel with their bare hands and their fingers that the clay is homogenized, or at least as homogenized as it can be, in order to be workable to their satisfaction. I generally cone up about 3 or 4 times. Once I've coned up and down enough times, you'll notice that the clay gets a little bit more together, the clay platelets start to align, and it gets a bit more compact. This will do 2 things. Number 1, like I've been saying the entire time, this will make your clay body a little bit more even. You're noticing that that clay twizzle is now gone, and that my top here is completely even. A nice little plateau for me to work with. This is a good sign that my clay body is nice and compact. All the clay platelets are a little bit more smushed together than they were previously, and this will be a more pleasurable working experience. On top of that, this is technically a skill that you need to learn in order to throw off of the hump. Throwing off of the hump is a highly prized skill by potters and production potters alike, allowing them to throw many pieces off of one large hump of clay, take them off, and produce as long as they have a hump of clay. But in order to throw off the hump, it is vital that you learn to cone up and down properly before you try and attempt that technique, as that is essentially half of the equation of throwing off of the hump. I personally wedge and cone up and down because sometimes I'm making like 2-foot tall vases off of the wheel, and I don't want no problems. Plus, it is super funny to do this. Every time it gets me every time. I'll never be tired of doing this. Look at it. Look at the little guy. You know, the crazier thing is, because you know how to cone up and down, this is very easily fixed. It's a wonderful skill to have. Well, thank you, Dirty Potters, for joining me today. You know, I wanted to give you something that would help you further your education in the ceramic art world, and I am going to start teaching classes soon in real life, I think at the beginning of August, or maybe July. I don't know when this video is out. I might have started already, but I'm teaching the intermediate classes, and this is one of the skills that I'm going to be teaching in the class, specifically because it's such a highly valued skill when moving into the intermediate phases. The neat thing is that this skill set is 2 different pieces of a valuable skill set. This allows you to essentially wedge on the wheel on top of learning how to throw off the hump at a later time. And there's some people who have accessibility problems who can't wedge, and so this is a little bit easier for them, especially with softer clay bodies. Some people's hands might hurt, they might have arthritis, you have no idea what's going on with people's bodies. So this is an alternative way to wedge, especially if you don't have a super hard clay body, as it's very easy. Anyway, thank you, Dirty Potters, for joining me today. Remember to click all those YouTube buttons so YouTube doesn't cone me in my sleep. What would that look like? it would look like that. That's what it would look like. Just a cone. You know what I mean? Just straight up cone. Damn. I mean, usually... You think I sped that up? I didn't. That took me 2 seconds. Maximum. But, to be fair, this is a very bad center. But, I think if a beginner saw this, they'd be like, did he center in like 1.5 seconds right now?